The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, and normally at this point I would be introducing my co-host Melanie Bleckel. Unfortunately, Mel is pretty much under the weather right now. And Mel, hurry up and get well real soon. Come back. We love you and miss you. But I am very pleased. My guest co-host this evening is a face very familiar to, I think, most of you. Tony Palmeria, communications professor at UW Oshkosh and host of a show just like this one, but with boys, yes. Commentary.
Yes.
So Tony, thanks very much for being here this evening. On Tuesday, February 17th, voters in the Oshkosh area will be going to the polls not just to vote in a presidential preference race, but also in the Oshkosh School Board race where there is a primary being held. There are 2 seats available at this time. Coming up for re-election is Theresa Thiel. She is running for another term, and she is going to be on a slate of 5 additional candidates. On this show, we'll be meeting 2 of them, Mrs. Thiel, as well as challenger Bob Bohlman, and he is our first guest. We're going to be doing 30-minute segments here, so it's a little different format than we're accustomed to. So, but anyway, Bob Bohlman, welcome, and thank you very much for being here tonight.
I appreciate the opportunity to let the public know my views.
Sure. Why don't we just start, you know, I know you've run a couple of times in the past for school board, but why don't we start by you telling voters a little bit about yourself and, you know, why you're running for school board?
Well, I'm a business owner. I have been a resident of the Oshkosh area for over 20 years. I'm married. I have 2 children in the educational system, a 16-year-old sophomore at West and a 17-year-old senior at West. I've been involved with the site councils of both the middle and high school. I am active in Rotary. I've participated in Leadership Oshkosh, and I believe that it's my obligation, as well as everyone else's, to serve the community whenever they can.
Are there particular issues that are bringing you into the race at this point, or is it just you want to make another stab at this to give something back to the community?
Well, I see at this point in education the chance for the greatest amount of change in the shortest period of time that's occurred in many years. With the advent of state standards and requirements of those and the No Child Left Behind Act, the districts are forced now to rethink the process of education, which they've never had to do before. At the same time, we're experiencing one of the tightest budget crunches we've had in years. And I feel what we need to do is to think creatively to possibly bring some of the attitudes of business into the public sector, to go ahead and look at education as a business. We have a budget of over $100 million. We serve a customer base that's constantly changing and in an environment that's constantly changing, and we need to bring different points of view to the board.
Do you think, Bob, that the current administration and school board does not look at the school district as a business?
I think at times they don't. In a business, there's accountability. Our district has a tendency to lack accountability. If we want accountability on the part of the student and on the part of the staff at the building level, we need to have accountability with the board and with administration. This doesn't always occur. There are numerous times where the board and administration don't follow their own policies.
Can you give us at least one example?
Yeah, I was just going to ask that, yeah.
Maybe 2?
A number of years back, I questioned under what authority they were charging me an art fee. It took them 2 months to find out it was a policy issued in 1986 that the last time it was actively followed was 1986. I just recently questioned why, when I asked for a copy of a classroom test, when my child had done poorly on it, I couldn't get it. And I was told by administration they were not aware that was going on. I came to find out that it possibly was violation of state statutes. Now, beginning of the school year, there was an administrative rule issued guaranteeing parental access to classroom tests. We have a situation where we have to delineate responsibility in order to have accountability.
Right, right. Sure.
You're a businessman in the community, you've said, and you want to see the district run as a business. Obviously, you're well aware of the budgetary problems that the district is facing and has been facing for some time. Have you agreed with, they struggled quite a bit to get a budget passed, as even the city council did and the county board and everyone else. Did you agree with the decisions that they made in reaching that balanced budget for this year? Or would you have done some things differently, and if so, what?
Well, that's a difficult question because it's hard to second guess what's going on in the past. Also, coming from the outside, it's very difficult to get information. When you request numbers and information, they're not always forthcoming. What I see the problem being is we have to, when we make cuts, make sure we don't forfeit services. Example, we have a district hotline number in the phone book. When you call it, which I did this afternoon, you get a recording by a gentleman who was terminated, whose last day of service was June 30th, containing information that's dated back to June 16th and 17th. When they did away with his position, unlike business, they didn't make sure someone else followed through. In business, if you remove an administrator, you delegate the responsibilities. I spoke to a building administrator who is having some problems now with our IT department because we don't have anyone there in charge to schedule training, to ensure people follow through with the needs that the buildings have. That creates frustration and animosity between the buildings and the administration. What I see is if you make a cut, you have to ensure that that cut does not adversely affect the children and their educational opportunities, nor the relationship with the community. Those are essential to building a good rapport.
Bob, as I look at the current school board, I would break it up into three groups. You've got Ben Schneider II, Dennis McHugh, and Dan Becker, who I would call maybe the three conservatives, or they call themselves the fiscal conservatives, let's say. Then you've got Tom McDermott and Amy Weinsheim, who I think like to portray themselves as the independents on the board. You never know which way they're going to go. And then you've got Theresa Thiel and Dennis Kavanaugh, who seem to be very pro-administration on most issues. Where would you place yourself in those groups?
Actually, I would have to say that I wouldn't place myself specifically in any one of those groups. What I like to do is look at the information before me and weigh my decision based on the facts I'm given. I may have an opinion prior to the facts, but I don't have a position prior to the facts. So what I like to do is say, how does this affect the budget? How does this affect education? The key is if you're going to sell a cut to the community or a change to the community, you can't sell it just on dollar savings.
Right.
You have to sell it on improved educational quality or protecting existing services. And I think the problem the district has is when they come forward with cuts, they portray them as cuts. They don't portray them as reallocation of funds. But also we have to be honest with the community and make sure that when we do something, we're telling them the whole picture. Classic example, we now have book fee in the district. The money goes to the general fund. When books are damaged or lost, the parents are responsible for paying for them. The money goes to the general fund. But if another section of philosophy is created at West and there's not enough textbooks, the money comes out of the school budget, out of the building fund.
Rather than the general fund,
Rather than
where
the general
money has
fund.
gone into.
When the building has no control over what the enrollments are, what the classes are going to be. The only time the district uses the money that's supposedly for books is to buy new textbooks. The money that was supposed to be for athletics goes to the general fund. I'm interested to see, I asked today, how many students participate in athletics at the schools, how many participate in multiple athletics, how much of the money collected actually was used to go to athletics, and was athletics cut at a greater rate than the funds raised? Are we truly taking the money from the parents and using it for what we said we're using it for? And that goes back to credibility. So would I be on the side of administration? I would support them if they're upfront and honest and they give me the information to back their position. Am I going to blindly follow when they propose things? No.
Well, what has been your view on the performance of Mr. McHugh as the board president?
I was very pleased to go to a board meeting and see a person at public forum get an answer to a question. There was nothing more irritating in the years past to go to public forum, speak your mind, and have no one in administration responsible ever to respond to you. I think it's a pleasant change. We're moving away from how long is the meeting going to take to how productive can the meeting be. And I think that's a good change.
The in the past, there's been a lot of discussion about possible referendums, in particular for doing a new sunset school and so forth. We've tried that a couple times, and it's failed. What is your position on referendums, and not just for a new sunset school, but for any type of major capital type issue that comes up?
Well, I think the only way a referendum is going to succeed is if the general public is convinced it's not because you can't spend your money wisely, but because it's essential to provide the goods and services to the students. It has to go back to the students. Would I support a referendum for a new school? It depends on where the school's going to be, where the students are coming from, how much money it's going to save. If we were to build a new school, I know part of the reorganization proposal that was just recently defeated had to do with building a school to replace Green Meadow and Lakeside, I believe. If they can say that it's cost justified because now we can better serve those students who will never have access to fiber optics because of the location, they can't have the technology access other people do. We can provide a building that's more economical to run and maintain and have services available to the students that they don't have now because of their smaller enrollment size, then I can go to the public and say, yes, I support a referendum for that reason. I have a hard time saying we need a new school when our buildings are under capacity. But what I think we need to do is, before we go to referendum, we have to think it through and say, this is in the best interest of the education of the children involved. And then we can sell it to the taxpayer.
Okay. At least one of the board members, Mr. Schneider, and Cheryl, you correct me if I'm wrong on this. I thought I heard him say on your show, on this show, that the teachers maybe are not sharing enough of the pain when we talk about cuts.
Boy, you know,
that they're guaranteed this 3.8% benefit package.
that sounds right, but I couldn't say for certain.
Right.
that
Well,
that's
let
what
me
he
ask
said.
Bob. Do you think that the teachers are sharing enough of the pain as we've been in this crisis and we're going to be in it for a while? What's your view on that?
Well, that's a difficult question. Do I feel teachers deserve to be paid adequately for the job they do? Yes. Do I feel that the teachers are being treated fairly? Yes. Coming from the private sector,
They are being treated fairly.
they're being treated fairly in perspective of what the average wage in the Valley is, the average benefit package in the Valley, the job security that exists, that doesn't exist much in other industries. Yes, they are. Do I think that a lot of them deserve to be compensated better? Yes. Will we have a situation where we will get better teachers if we pay more money? Not necessarily. What I think we need to do is encourage the teachers to improve, provide the means for them to improve, and then pay them accordingly. But at this time, it's moot. What I believe they should get, and what the districts are able to get or give them are two different things.
Right, right.
I think what we need to do in reality is we need to pool our resources and go after the real problem, which is about an hour and a half southwest of here.
In Madison.
In Madison. Because until the funding structure changes, the current structure for teacher pay increases is essential to keep services available to students.
Can I ask two more questions about
Oh,
teachers?
sure. Yeah,
Cheryl?
go right ahead.
Just,
Go right ahead.
the first one is, there seems to be some division on the board about granting teachers unpaid leaves of absences. It seems like there are some board members that will never vote to approve that kind of thing. They believe teachers should not be given that. Other board members seem to either always support it or believe we should also take it on a case-by-case basis. Would you support an unpaid leave of absence for a teacher under some conditions?
Under some conditions, yes.
Okay.
I wouldn't say blanketly that I'm
Well,
going to
let me give you a
support it.
specific case. I think there was one case, and I know this just from watching their meetings. It sounded like somebody wanted to leave to basically seek out some other career options. Does that, to you, sound like a legitimate reason for having an unpaid leave of absence?
Actually, no. I don't
Okay.
think that's legitimate. I laud them for their honesty. Not many people are going to do that, but we are having a hard time with teachers as far as getting qualified, keeping qualified teachers and competing because
Right.
of the people afraid of what's going to happen to benefit packages, people retiring early. At this point, to go ahead and encourage someone to look for other work, to me, is counterproductive. It's not in our own best interest.
Okay, and then finally, on the qualified economic offer, is that something that you think the state should just abandon, or should we keep that in place?
It all depends on how the funding structure is changed.
Okay.
If we do away with the QEO, we go back to arbitration, and teachers are awarded a 5% increase instead of a 3.8, which is current, I believe, the max.
That's the max.
Right. We're talking 1.2% on approximately, what, $70,000 is the teacher's salary? 70 million, I mean, in that.
That sounds right.
So we're talking about almost $1 million budget shortfall because of that increase. It's real hard to swallow. We're having a hard enough time dealing with the potential 800,000 coming up next year.
Right, right.
So to say I'm in favor or against QEO, I think it's essential to the stability of the districts at this point. Do I think it's fair? Not necessarily fair or unfair. I just think that what we have to do is look at what goes on in the private sector in the same area. Don't compare our wages to those of Chicago or to Milwaukee. Compare it to other people working in the valley, because that's the taxpayer you have to justify the levy to.
Right, right. Okay.
You know, thinking in terms of bringing back more accountability, or just bringing some accountability to the board and the administration, I realize that if elected to the school board, Bob, you're only going to be one vote out of a number of them. But what kinds of things would you suggest in order to bring back some of that accountability and try and move forward and get past with your fellow board members?
Well, the first thing you need to do is remember, as a board member, your work begins the day you vote on something. It doesn't end then. Because once you put something into policy, it's your responsibility to make sure that policy is followed. The biggest problem in the educational system is they're afraid of the word mandate, because the state mandates, the federal government mandates. But within the system, getting people to buy in, as the phrase goes, is the problem. But when something becomes policy, it's the board's responsibility to make sure administration follows through. Ultimately, sad as it may seem, Dr. Heilemann is responsible for everything, because he's the one who's supposed to make sure that the system follows the policies. And then he delegates on from there. So what I would like to see is possibly a review of policies, make sure the policies are being enforced that exist. If not, why they're not being enforced, do they need to be changed? Who's responsible for enforcing them? I asked the other day, whose job is it to know whose job it is? I haven't gotten an answer. If you don't know whose job it is, you don't know who to hold accountable.
Right.
So I think that's one of the things we have to do, is we have to make more job descriptions that are extremely specific and clearly defined. Because if you don't know who's supposed to be doing it, you don't know who to hold accountable.
But it sounds, Bob, like the board before Dennis McHugh was president had a majority of members that believed that CQI, or continuous quality improvement, was a way to get at these things you're talking about. And now the McHugh board has basically rejected CQI. And in fact, many people interpreted last April's elections as a rejection of the CQI procedures. What are your views on CQI? Does that help get at the things you're talking about, or does it move us further away from that?
The check portion of CQI works towards that. The problem with CQI is we spend more time discussing the problem than working on the problem.
Okay.
I sat on the high school grading committee. It was close to 60, 70 people. Try to get that many people to agree on anything. I think part of the problem is the board and administration have to be willing to make decisions and then suffer from the result. I mean, if it doesn't work, it didn't work, but make the decision. You have to be willing to take responsibility and then follow through. In business, who's the first person that goes if a company's not making a profit? The CEO. Why? He made the decisions that people followed. We need to start treating our education system the same way. We need to go ahead and have the qualified people, hopefully the people we've hired are qualified, that's why we hired them, make intelligent decisions and then follow through on them.
But Bob, if the board makes a decision, let's say, on a 5-2 vote, and you are in the minority, do you then, as a board member, are you obligated to support that decision anyway? This has been an issue on the board over the years. If I voted no, am I still supposed to publicly support what we now agreed to do? What's your view on that?
I don't think support's the word. It is now policy. It's the board member's job to make sure that that policy is used in a way that best serves the educational interest of the children. Put personal interest aside.
Okay.
You can't change it now. So go ahead and make it work the best way it can for the kids. If you call that supporting it, then yes, I would say you have to support it. But what I would say is you have to make sure that it is used the way it was intended and to the best interest of the children, whether you agree with it or not. That's your obligation.
So make sure those 5 people who voted yes actually now are doing what they said they would do.
Well, it's not just the 5 people.
Right. Everyone
Myself
now.
also.
Right.
And administration. Because that's now policy, and the purpose of the policy is to improve education. Let's make it do that, whether you agree with it or not.
So the district as a whole presents a united front to move that policy forward and to make it become the law of the land, if you will, even though you didn't personally support it. You're willing to forego your personal feelings, personal preferences, and move it forward in the best way that it can work to improve education.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Go ahead.
What are your views, Bob, on this thing called neighborhood schools? In the last few years, it seems like we have candidates coming forward who say, I'm running to support neighborhood schools. Are you running to support neighborhood schools? And if so, what does that mean?
Well, that was the question I was going to ask you. What is a neighborhood school? How do you define a neighborhood school? Some people define the
I don't
school
think
that
anybody really knows
my
for
parents
sure.
went to, my grandparents went to, my child can walk to.
Well, yeah, let's define it that way.
Well, then my child has never gone to a neighborhood school because they've always been bused.
They've always been bused.
Okay?
Okay.
What I think we need to stop thinking in terms of neighborhood school and think in terms of school community. Not community schools, but school community. How do we create an environment in every school that is a community, a cooperative effort to better the education of the children on part of the staff, the administration, the local businesses, the parents, the neighbors. And I think that's part of what, when people talk about neighborhood schools, they're talking about. They're talking about the fact that everyone there works together for the children. And I think what we have to keep in mind is I would not support closing a school just for the sake of saving money. I would support closing a school if it is essential to make sure those students have access to the services that every other student in the district has. It's two different things.
Right, right.
Making sure children have access is the most important thing. And if the end result has to be closing a school, then we have to think long and hard how we're going to do it and ensure that the transition for those children is the best, but make sure wherever they are, there is a school community.
Well, what is your view on how we should get the parents' feedback on what the school community should be? It sounds like from listening to you, you've been a little bit dissatisfied as a parent in trying to get your views heard by the school system. I mean, do you think it should be the site councils that get the parental feedback? Should people like you contact the superintendent directly? Should all this be done in open hearings through the school board? I mean, how do we get the parents to give us their views on what the school community should be?
I would say all of the methods you've just mentioned,
Right.
whichever one is the most comfortable for that individual, whether it be personally emailing a board member,
Oh, okay.
calling central administration, speaking to a teacher who they feel comfortable will relay the information on correctly. I think that what we need to do is open up the lines of communications in all areas, because not everyone feels comfortable sitting at the board meeting and voicing their opinion.
Right.
Not everyone feels comfortable speaking directly to administration. Unfortunately, we lost a position in this district last year, the public relations person.
You said that's unfortunate we lost that.
I think it's unfortunate because we need someone who's not spending their entire day with the operations of the educational system to be there available for people to voice their opinions to. Try to get a hold of an administrator on the phone and get a call back at a time when you're home or available. They're extremely busy. But if we have someone whose job it is to respond to people, the surest way to diffuse a situation is not refer people to 7 different numbers.
Yeah.
Have one person who, if nothing else, can say, I'm sorry, I don't have the answer now, but I will call you back and tell you who can answer it.
And that's just good business 101.
That's good business 101, but the district doesn't have that. We don't have someone whose job it is specifically to do that, and I think we need that, whether it be to assign that duty to someone within the system right now, or find a way to create that position again, because $50,000 or $60,000 a year sounds like a lot of money, but diffusing volatile situations because people have not been given answers in a timely fashion costs more.
Right.
Okay.
If
Well, we're just about out of time. Why don't you take about 45 seconds and just look right into camera number 3 over here and tell the people in Oshkosh why they should vote for you on February 17th.
Well, I believe that I can be an asset to the Oshkosh area school system. I believe I bring in a point of view. I ask questions that aren't normally asked. I also would like to take this time to thank all the other candidates for being willing to run, being willing to serve, because it's a sad state of affairs that when we have a community this large, we don't always have people willing to serve the community. Whether I win or lose, I will still be involved in the educational system, and I will try to help those people do the job the best they can and provide whatever support I can for them. I believe I can do the job. I would like to do the job. I ask for your vote.
And do you have an email address or a phone number that you'd like to give the audience real quickly, how they can contact you?
They can call me at 233-6742 is my office number, and they can leave a message if I'm not there and I'll get back. My email is wdbasic@vbe.com, and I check that daily.
All right. Very good. Bob, thanks so much for being here. It's been a pleasure, and good luck next month. We're going to take a real short break right now, and when we come back in a couple of minutes, we'll be joined by current school board member and candidate, incidentally also for school board, Theresa Thiel. We'll be right back.
Good evening. Follow me, please.
Imagine what America would be like today if Martin Luther King never had a dream. Help keep the dream alive. To find out more about the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C., call or log on now.
Oshkosh Community Access TV2 is your local sports channel. Follow your favorite Oshkosh teams each week as CATV2 presents the high school game of the week. Besides football and basketball, we feature soccer, gymnastics, swimming, wrestling, and volleyball. Sundays at 8, Mondays at noon, and Wednesdays at 8, CATV2 is the place to be for high school sports. The high school game of the week, here on Oshkosh Community Access TV2.
I want to
Have an impact.
make a difference. I want my voice to be heard.
Take matters into your own hands. Smack down your vote for the candidates who represent you and the issues you care about. Make time on Election Day to vote in elections in your community.
Have an impact.
Make a difference.
Let your voice be heard.
To learn more about the candidates where you live, contact the league in your state or community through lwv.org.
Smack down your vote on Election Day.
The Friends of OCAT is a nonprofit group that supports Oshkosh Community Access television programming and facilities. The Friends sponsor membership, underwriting, and fundraising projects. Their mission is to provide quality programming, to plan and implement fundraising activities, to develop a supportive membership, and to raise awareness of OCAT. If you would like to become a member and support Oshkosh Community Access Television, buy an OCAT card and enjoy discounts at many local businesses. Thanks for viewing OCAT.
Hi again, everyone, and welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, and for those of you just tuning in, Melanie is under the weather during this particular taping. But I am very pleased to have Tony Palmeria from Commentary joining me this evening as a guest co-host. So we are joined at this time by Mrs. Theresa Thiel. She is one on a slate of 6 candidates running for school board. And because there are 6 candidates at this particular juncture, there will be a primary, and that primary will be held on Tuesday, February 17th. Mrs. Thiel is the only incumbent who is on the ballot. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you
It's a
for
pleasure to
asking
have
me.
you. Why don't we start, you can tell us a little bit about how long you've served on the board, a little bit about your background, and why you're seeking re-election.
Okay. I'm finishing my first term on the board, so that's a 3-year term. I have 2 children in the district, one at Jefferson Elementary School and one at South Park, both daughters. And as most people know, I'm married to a teacher at Carl Traeger Middle School. And
We'll talk about that.
I'm sure we will. I'm committed to children and to providing the best education possible. And I've spent a lot of time. I started following the school board in the fall of 1997 when my daughter entered kindergarten, and pretty much attended just about every school board meeting even before I was on the board. So I'm running again because I really feel like there's a lot more that needs to be done, and I want to be part of that.
You've been on the board now for 3 years. What would you consider to be your major accomplishments as a board member?
Well, you're one of 7 individuals, so you can't really do a whole lot, this is my thing. But I feel that the district has done some positive things. We have the whole, and a lot of it has come, down from the NCLB, but I think that the whole curriculum support specialist and the whole way of looking at a new way to deliver the curriculum to students, that it isn't a teacher standing up and lecturing to kids anymore. I think that's really a positive thing, and something that's very difficult because it's a major change in the way we provide education. But I think it's a really positive thing for kids and for education.
Sure. Well, you did bring up in your opening statement that your husband is a teacher in the district. So why don't we just talk about that and just get that right out of the way?
Okay.
It's probably one of the more uncomfortable issues that you'll be facing in this election. Some of your fellow school board members have asked you to resign or have felt that you should resign. The Oshkosh Northwestern has on a number of occasions called for your resignation. You have had to abstain from a fair number of votes and even some discussion on certain issues. Do you feel that not just the voters in this community, but anyone who pays into the Oshkosh public school system, do you feel that they are getting fair representation when you have to abstain the way you do?
Well, yes, I do, and I would like to point out I did a little research. To date, in my term, up through the December 3rd meeting, which was as far as the minutes were in the book, there have been 464 votes cast. Of those 464 votes, I abstained from 15 of them. 14, one I wasn't at the meeting. That is 3%. So 97% of the time, I am able to vote on the issues. I missed one special meeting. We've had 75 meetings. I missed one special meeting. I have never missed a regularly scheduled board meeting. I've never missed a Policy and Governance Committee, which is the committee I've been on since I started on the board. Most every committee I'm on, I attend every one of those meetings. There are other board members who have served during the same time as I have. Some haven't had the same number of votes because they haven't been on as long, who have a higher percentage of times because they weren't at a meeting and didn't vote on anything. I mean, yes, I've put it out there. These are the things I cannot vote on. I cannot vote on the teacher's contract, and I do not participate in the discussions of the bargaining. I can't vote on health care issues because I'm covered by the district's health care. And if the contract hasn't been settled, I can't vote on the budget. I did vote on the budget this year because the contract for this year was settled. So I feel that the vast majority of the time, I am able to vote on the issues that matter. And I think I bring a unique perspective in that I have spent the last 7 years giving various amounts of time to my children's elementary school. This year I spend 25 hours a week there. I see firsthand what goes on in a classroom. I see how things have changed just since my 6th grader started kindergarten, how the issues that we're facing, the at-risk children that we see, and I think that brings a unique perspective that no one else really has. I see every day what goes on. I also help out in the office. I rarely take lunch. I just help out answering phones and whatever, and ice packs and all of that. So I know what goes on in a school, and I do think that, it's been said that there's so many things I can't vote on. I don't think 14 votes in a 464 votes is a horrible thing, and I have made it a point to attend every meeting. I schedule what little vacations I take so that I don't ever miss a meeting, and that's what I've done.
Those 14 or 15 votes, were they all budget-related votes?
2 were budget, maybe 3. A couple were, the issue of should we go out and, the healthcare issue was should we go out and find out if there's somebody else who can give us a better healthcare. I didn't vote on that. I mean, I'm very careful to not do things like that. One of them was, I sort of questioned, my husband was getting a reimbursement check for something, to me that seemed a little much because he wasn't getting anything he wasn't supposed to have,
Right.
So, and the contract, the contract vote, I will never be able to vote on the contract.
Do you believe that state law needs to be changed so that someone like you could be able to vote on these things? Because our state legislature right now just passed something called the Jobs Creation Act, in which the lead sponsor in the state Senate, Senator Kathy Stepp, is a home builder. And the bill that she voted on directly benefits home builders.
Yep.
Well,
And there was an ethics complaint filed, and the ethics board said, well, she doesn't have to recuse herself because then no one would ever be able to vote. Why are people like you singled out?
I question it sometimes. For example, I'm sure that there are members of the legislature who have spouses that are educators who voted for or against the QEO.
Right.
The contract is one where I can see that perhaps that's not one. The budget issue doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I would like to point out I am able to, and we've gotten letters from the ethics board, I'm able to vote on every, if we say, okay, we need to cut, what do we do, $1.5 million out of the budget, I am able to vote on every one of those kinds of, this is out, this is in, should we have, how many administrators are we going to cut, those kinds of things. I mean, it's just the overall at the end, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but that is what the ethics board has ruled, that you can't vote on the overall budget if the contract hasn't been settled.
Well, one of the arguments that I've heard from a few people, one of them Ben Schneider himself, is that not only can you not vote on certain issues, but perhaps your votes on other issues are somewhat slanted in that, and I'll give you an example, maybe voting to cut such and such a type of program in order to help ensure that there is money to give the teachers their 3.8% raise of pay and benefits, and without having a lot of fuss being made about it. How would you respond to something like that?
when we start making those kind of decisions, where are we going to cut, that's all been pretty much decided by the board, or that's been brought forward that these are our packages that we're willing to offer to our employees. So all of that's sort of already in the budget, as it were, and then it's like, this is what we're left with. So we're not saying, there's never been a discussion of, well, if we cut the PR director, then we can put some more money into that package that we've set up for our employees, whichever employees they may be. So that's not how it works. We don't say, oh, now we save this so we can put it in there. If the time came where that's what the discussions became, then I probably wouldn't vote on cutting this program to put it in that pocket. But that's not how our budgets are developed.
There was, you had mentioned that you had missed one special meeting. Was that the closed session meeting where the calendar was being discussed?
No, I always excuse myself during the OEA bargaining, if they're discussing bargaining issues for the OEA, the Oshkosh Education Association. No, the one meeting I didn't go to was the re-vote on the contract. I was out of town, and I would have come back in, but I would have had to abstain, so it didn't make a lot of sense for me to come back into town only to abstain. That was the vote, that it was a 3-3 vote, and 1 week later, it was suddenly a 6-0 vote, which I never did understand, but nothing changed in that contract. But
Well, there was a closed session meeting that you had to sit out of that discussed specifically the school calendar and so forth. But then when they came back into open session, you did vote on that calendar. How do you vote on something when you haven't been privy to all of the discussion about it?
Well, I don't know why they would have said that I needed to be excused from a vote on the calendar, because the calendar, I can't vote on things that benefit me financially, personally, or treat my husband in a way different than others would be treated. I've always voted on the calendar. There's no question that I can vote on the calendar, and I can be part of discussions. And I knew full well why the calendar was coming back the way it was. It was so that we could have staff development, and that's why it was structured the way it was. I knew exactly what I was voting on. And if they happened to discuss that during other parts of OEA bargaining, there's nothing I can do about that if they're discussing things that I could be part of and no one said, oh, come back in the room. So I really don't know what they would have discussed in relation to the calendar. If they did it and came right back out and voted, I don't know how it could have been part of bargaining.
Well, I guess what the point is, though, is that you weren't able to be in on some of those discussions, and yet you voted on it at the end.
Well, it's not that I wasn't able to be. It could be that I wasn't there for whatever reason, because someone started talking about things that they weren't, or they didn't think, oh, she can come back in now. But I am allowed to discuss the calendar.
Okay, but the point is, you weren't there for some of that discussion, and so I guess I'm wondering how you effectively vote on something when you've not gotten all the details and you're not privy to the discussion.
Well, the same argument could be said for anyone who missed an executive session meeting, and then should they not be, if they didn't come to that because they were ill on vacation, then should they also not be allowed to vote on whatever comes up the next time because they weren't privy to all of that?
Well, sure, but I mean, if
But
we have a
doesn't
candidate
happen.
where that's an issue, I will certainly ask them that. But I guess in this particular case, I'm wondering how you vote on that.
I feel that I fully knew what the issues were with that calendar, and that's why I voted on it, and that's why I voted the way I did, because the issues were out there by the time we discussed it. It was out in public, and all the issues that had come up were there.
Theresa, last April, April of 2003, all the incumbents who ran lost, except for Mr. Kavanaugh.
Yes.
You were on that same board, obviously,
Yes.
right? Are you feeling any heat as an incumbent from that period, or do you? Let me put it this way: how did you interpret last April's election? Did you see it as a rejection of the incumbents on the board?
I saw it as, I think it's almost impossible to judge why people voted the way they did, who voted, who stayed home thinking, incumbents, they've been in forever. I don't know that there's a way to interpret it. You look at what the two board members we have, and I'd say they're very different in the way they vote, in the way they, so if people wanted a specific kind of board member, they voted for two different board members. So I don't really know how to do that. And as far as, I've never looked at, especially because of the issue of the conflict, I've never looked at it as, I'm an incumbent, it's okay.
Right. Well, the incumbents who lost last year, Mrs. Bohlman and Mr. Stratz, were very big supporters of continuous quality improvement. And you have been also.
I don't know that it's come up since I've actually been on the board. And
Are you not a supporter of CQI?
To me, it depends on what you mean by that. I mean, things I've seen teachers do in the classroom. I went over to Carl Traeger Elementary School once and watched Mr. Schutenhelm and his teaching partner, and I was amazed at the things they did, at how committed the kids were to their own learning. I think those things are wonderful. I think it makes sense. Quality improvement. Who doesn't want to continuously improve what you do? But you know, I don't know what that means when people say, are you a big supporter of that? I want to improve. I want people to be held accountable. I want to see things improve. Is this, you know, sometimes I felt like I'm not a patient person. Things don't move fast enough. Sometimes you get stuck in, you know, one sector of it. So to say that I don't think we should improve, or I don't think we should get buy-in or feedback from groups, I mean, that's how I interpret the CQI. You go out to various groups and say, this is what we think, what do you think? I think that's good and beneficial and valuable.
Well, how would you evaluate the quality of interaction on this year's board, the Dennis McHugh board? He's been president this year. Is the interaction better than it was before he became president?
I don't know that things have changed a whole lot. I really, some of my frustration is that I don't think we spend enough time focusing on what our role is. And we spend more time focusing on, or we don't know, or we don't have a cohesive answer to what is our role. And that gets frustrating. And I don't think we really listen to each other and, you know, really listen and try to come to a compromise in a way that makes the district and the children and the community better off. I really think that is our role. That we are to balance the values that people share. There are values that Americans share: liberty, equality, community, and prosperity. And those four values are in balance. And the best you can do is to try to balance those values and leave people better off. That's why you have 7 very different individuals serving in that capacity. Our job is not to make technical decisions. We should be balancing those values. We hire experts to make technical decisions. If we start trying to do that, we don't have the expertise, and then we lose the role, which is why we're elected by the public.
Can I pursue this, Cheryl?
Sure, go ahead.
Do you, as I watch the school board meetings, you often seem to get frustrated, it's been my perception, at what you seem to suggest is micromanaging on the part of the board. That you seem to get even angry when some board members request lots of documentation from the administration. Do you think that some of the board members just ask too much of the administration, that they micromanage them too much?
Again, I think our role is to balance those values. That's why you have 7 very different individuals, because if you didn't need to look at everyone's perspective, you'd hire a superintendent who has the educational expertise and you'd let them run with it. But we believe in representative democracy, and that means that my viewpoints and everybody else's viewpoints should be heard and listened to, because we do represent people of the community. You can't just always go with, well, 12 people came and they're very upset about this, so we can't do it. We should try to focus on those values, have those discussions. We should be deciding how much money do we want to spend on technology, how much do we value that, how much do we want to make things equal, how much liberty do you want to take away to make equality, how much community do you value without taking away people's liberty, those kinds of decisions, versus do we have CRT monitors or do we have LCD monitors? That's a technical decision. Our job should be, this is how much money you've got to spend, now you go spend it wisely. Because we're not educational computer experts. And we spend too much time, I think, focusing on those things, and we're not doing the heart of what we're elected to do, which is to represent the people and the values that they value, which are going to be different for all of us. And if we truly listen to each other and try to hear everyone's viewpoint and then develop a policy or support a resolution that balances those values and leaves everyone better off, as opposed to just dismissing.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, how would you go about changing that then? Because you've said a couple of times now that you don't really think that you all listen to each other. And I think that's true. I've watched enough school board meetings, I couldn't agree with you more. What should be done then? I mean, you folks are the district, basically. I mean, you see to it that administrators are hired, you oversee the teachers who are being hired. I mean, you vote on those appointments. What would you change? How would you accomplish what you want to do?
What we need to do as a district, and I've said this from the very moment I started watching and the very first time I ran, we don't communicate well. You know, I don't think we need a committee of 80 people like the Boundary Committee. You know, the subcommittee that I was chair of had 20 people on it. And that was manageable, and we had a lot of discussion. But I think what we need to do is find a way to really go out there to the public and get feedback. Not say, this is what we're going to do, what do you think about it? But these are the issues, where do you stand? I mean, I went to a seminar in Madison where this individual from the University of Chapel Hill, who talked about these values, came and said, here's a hot button issue. Now, this is how you go about, you build a community and you listen to everyone and you try to do what I said, to come together and leave the community better off. As opposed to making things divisive, as opposed to, I take this stand, you take that stand, you try to bring people together. And I'd like to see us actually try that. You know, boundary issues and consolidations and all those hot button things, to bring the community together, to have a real discussion where people really listen to each other, and then we come up with a solution. You're not going to ever please everyone, I know that. But that you really have listened to everybody's viewpoint and try to balance all of those values, because people are very committed to what they believe in, and have everyone really listening. I think it would benefit the entire community, the school district, and especially the children.
Do you have an example of where the district has done this? Has this not ever happened since you've been on the board? Has everything ended up divisive? And
Well, I mean, most issues that are very hot button, and the more values that you're trying to balance, the more hot button it is. If there's just one value, then it's a technical decision and there is no conflict. But if you're trying to balance people's liberty, their equality, prosperity, and a sense of community, when you try to balance all of that, it's going to be very hot button. I think what usually happens is we say, this is what we're thinking about, people come out, they get very upset, and the issue dies.
But see, let me come at it from another point. I think the opposite of what you might be talking about is what happened with the West High School mascot. That was an issue, very divisive, right?
Extremely.
Lots of people wanted to keep the Indian. Lots of people, you were one of 5,
Yes.
that wanted to change it to Wildcats. I supported the change. But what I found refreshing was the board made a decision. Some people won that, some people lost. We moved on, the world is still spinning. Why isn't that a good model for almost every issue in the district? It seems like you're saying, no, what we really should be doing is keep discussing and discussing and discussing. Isn't that model of what we did with the mascot a good model? That's representative democracy.
Well, that worked for an issue like that, but when you're talking about something about changing the structure of all of your schools, or closing schools, or consolidating, or going to K2, 3, 5, or changing all the boundaries district-wide, I think that's not, to me, that's not the same kind of issue. I mean, that mascot issue for me was a moral issue. It was this is the right thing to do in my belief. And yeah, some things, but maybe there wouldn't have been as much divisiveness and anger and people a year later still being upset if we had started that. And I'm not saying, because like I said, I'm not a patient person. I'm not saying for 3 years we discussed the issue. But if we started with a forum of, you give your viewpoint, you give yours, let's listen to each other, really listen, and then say, and now we're going to do this because, I mean, the result would be the same, but people would feel heard. That's what I think people want a lot. They just want to be heard. Even if you totally don't do what they want, they feel better having been heard.
Right.
I think a lot of people, though, obviously there's apathy out there in the community, and it's staggering.
Yes.
It's horrible. But I think that the people that you're hearing from are probably the same people that you'd hear from if you said, give us your viewpoints. And some of those people don't feel that they're being listened to as it is. How would you go about changing that and making them feel more like they're being heard?
Again, I think a different form. I mean, a school board meeting where people are, speaking for 5 minutes and then going back and sitting down, that's not a dialogue. I'd like to see the board have a real dialogue with the community, with people. I went to a meeting that was set up with parents talking about that K2, 3, 5 configuration and what they wanted to see and what they believed. And I was there, and Tom McDermott was there, and we actually had a chance to have a little dialogue. Well, this is my perspective. It was very pleasant. It was very meaningful, and I would like to see more things like that. Not an auditorium of 300 people, but perhaps a community group in every one of our schools.
Town hall type meeting.
Yes, but in each school, a smaller group, so that you can actually have that dialogue.
Last year, Theresa, McHugh and Schneider wrote letters to the paper saying that the incumbents should not be returned to office. I have no idea if they plan to write letters this year saying you shouldn't be returned. Do you think that would be inappropriate? Do you think it's inappropriate for members of the board to write letters to the paper saying another member of the board should not be returned to office?
I've never seen before that it either way. I've never seen board members write letters saying you should elect this person. In the past, they've always stayed out of it. But it's a free country. You're entitled to do what you want. I would personally never do that.
Why?
Because I don't think it's very professional. I don't think it builds. You don't know who's going to win.
Why is it not professional? Isn't it maybe in some sense healthy for democracy that people on a school board are laying their positions on the line for everyone to see?
And that's fine, but I don't think that everything in there was necessarily accurate.
Okay.
What
was inaccurate? We're going back
at this
in the past,
point, yeah.
But the general.
For example, Karen Bowen has never supported closing an elementary school.
Okay.
She has never been. And it's one of my frustrations that absolutely it's off the table, but it was in there that she was the one that wanted to close. It wasn't. It just wasn't a fact. Okay. It's just not something I would do. One, you still may have to work with that person, and it's just not something I would do, but people have the right to do whatever they choose.
We had gotten a letter that someone had sent in a question, and I'm just going to read it because it said, "Is your main support the teachers union? Why did Mr. Herrick's," and then they've got teachers union president, "write a letter in support of you entitled, 'Theresa, we need you,' if they're not your main support? And do they support other board members in this manner, or just you since your husband is a teacher?"
I don't know, though. They're the one group that I can't do anything for them because I can't vote on any issue that might benefit them because I'm not allowed to by the ethics law. Do teachers support me? I know the teachers at my children's school, they know that I'm committed to kids, that I'm there to help kids. Yeah, there are supportive teachers. Does the union itself? There are members of the union who, they were the people that I thought would be the most upset when I couldn't vote on the contract. And I did get some letters or emails saying, hey, we still support you. We know you're there for the kids. So, yes, they support me. Do they support other members? Yeah, I think they actually came out in the last election in support of a couple of the incumbents.
Okay. Got a real quick question?
No, it's the time for the closing statement.
Just about. Is there anything else that you wanted to say? I'm going to give you an opportunity in just a moment to give a closing statement, but any issue that we didn't discuss that you would like to see discussed?
No, I'm glad I finally got the opportunity to give the facts on that. I can't ever vote on anything, and there's so many issues I can't vote on.
Okay. All right, well then why don't you look right into camera 3 there, and in about 30 to 45 seconds tell us and the voters why they should vote for you next month.
Well, I've ending my first term on the board, and I really feel there's a lot more that needs to be done. I'm committed to children, I'm committed to education, and I really want to make this the best district it can possibly be, and we're facing very difficult times, and I think having some expertise and knowledge of what you're facing is going to be very important because, as I said, I've followed this school board since the fall of 1997, and I really want to, and I will stay committed to education and to this district whether I am elected or not, but I would like to serve on the board again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And folks, remember to go to the polls on Tuesday, February 17th. Politics is not a spectator sport.
Do you have a number people can reach you at?
My phone number is 236-8719, and my email address is tmthiel@go.com.
All right,
Great.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank
Tony, thanks to you for pinch hitting this evening, and Mel and I both appreciate that very much. And thank you very much for joining us as well. Remember to check out our website, www.eyeonoshkosh.com. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care and keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.